Would you like to reach our film and TV review podcast audience? Do you have a product or service of interest to film and TV home consumers or followers of the entertainment industry? Have a film or show production to publicize? For affordable price plans for all budgets, get in touch and find out about our introductory advertising options. Reach our audience of film and TV viewers and visit our site contact page at filmandtvreview.com, or you can email us at business@filmandtvreview.com. Reach out today. Welcome to filmandtvreview.com. Catch the latest film, TV and streamed show reviews every week. The views and opinions expressed by the authors and those providing comments are theirs alone. They do not reflect the views, opinions or position of filmandtvreview.com or their respective parent companies or affiliates. Filmandtvreview.com makes no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this program and is for entertainment purposes only. Episodes may contain adult humor and language. For full terms and conditions, see filmandtvreview.com.
Hello there, and just welcome to this episode of Film and TV Review. This episode's a documentary special. We're talking to those who work in front of and behind the camera, and today I'm kind of joined by artist and filmmaker Larry Achiampong. He's already had some good notices with his first full-length feature, Wayfinder, and it's a basically it's set. You could say almost during the pandemic, but it's more of a, I think, a deliberately vague era. I think it follows the journey of a character called the Wanderer, a young lady who's traveling across England, I think starting from the north and passing through different regions and maybe, I'd say, waypoints of culture and heritage along her way. Just first, I thought start about your own background. I mean, you're Ghanaian British. So, I mean, growing up the 80s, 90s, London, how did you get up until this point, into wanting to make films? Because you're an artist, really. I mean, from your beginning.
Yeah, no, you're correct. So, yeah, in terms of, my background studying wise, I formerly studied to be an artist. Of course, yeah, how does that kind of like make sense with me making films? And my background for sure, I grew up in East London. I grew up in Bethnal Green, mostly rightly as you say. My parents, they came over to the UK from Ghana, so yeah, I'm first generation. They left Ghana at a point in time where there was civil unrest, and so they wanted to try to have a life for myself and also my siblings, and I was mostly raised by my mum, raised partially by my dad. Like later on I lived with him in Dagenham, but mostly raised by my mum. And my interactions with film in that respect, I've got to say, is really from the point of view of like popular culture. I have my mum particularly to kind of thank for, like she loves cinema. Where she grew up in a place called Kumasi in Ghana, she would go to the cinema quite a lot. She'd go to these makeshift cinemas, essentially these community cinemas where people kind of like would darken spaces and invite people along and so on. I don't know if you've kind of like seen like old school like Ghana posters of renditions of films and things like that. I'm sure you've probably seen that kind of thing. But of course, like that's that's what she grew up surrounded by. And she very much liked, well, she likes actually still is, you know, into film. I take her to the cinema sometimes, but she really loves, you know, action films in particular. You know, the old school Bruce Lee movies, Enter the Dragon, Big Boss, that kind of thing. And a lot of, you know, action. So I, you know, got introduced through that. You know, there are other types of films that she enjoyed as well. She liked a lot of like Bollywood films and Nollywood cinema as well. One of the Bollywood films I remember like the most, like us kind of like watching on rerun, was Sita Gita, about, you know, two twins who are kind of like they're in relationships and they're mistaken for one another. They kind of switch places with one another. And one of the things I remembered with that actually was we didn't have a version of the film with subtitles, but but you know, the film is so infectious, so full of body and life that it kind of didn't matter. You're learning the story through the gestures, through an understanding of sorts of sound, like gasps or cheers and things like that. So yeah, you know, like I said, you know, although I did study art, you know, I at BA level and then master's level, you know, my interaction with approaching art, let alone even thinking about film, is really from a, you know, being like part of the political underclass or working class. So that's kind of like lent its way to how I think about, you know, making films as well. And that's before we even talk about video games. And of course, video games, comics, those things are really like important to me. Even now, I'm, you know, very much a, you know, avid gamer. I don't get to play as much as I wish I did because I'm so busy making new works and things like that. But you know, again, you know, you think about Bethnal Green within that period of the 80s and 90s, people who, you know, if you even think musically as well, going into the, you know, early noughties as well, people who are making, you know, garage, moving into grime sounds and what have you. You know, I was surrounded by people that were creating, and that love of creating was just bubbling up around me.
So I mean, you kind of like, you've worked in quite a few mediums,
Yeah.
sculpting and collaging and so forth. And so it'd be quite an undertaking then to, I mean, you've done some small films, but then what kind of pushed you to kind of like go to a full feature length, which is like 89 minutes? This is quite big. I'm guessing, did you always intend it? I guess it starts from the script form, you'd already written it out, or was it something that's evolved and you found it was just getting bigger?
Yeah, no, good question. So, you know, with Wayfinder, which was initially, it was commissioned by Turner Contemporary. So of course, like, as well as it being shown cinematically, it was commissioned as an artwork for, you know, my current solo show, which is touring, which started off at Turner Contemporary, which that leg of the tour finished 19th of June. The next leg of it will then continue in MK Gallery in October through to January of next year. And the final leg will take place in May 2023 at Baltic in Gateshead, right through until, you know, October of 2023. So, you know, when I was initially approached about, you know, essentially creating my first major UK solo exhibition show, I'd got to a point where I felt that I'd kind of built a language with the short films that I'd made, that I wanted to be as ambitious as possible. But if I'm honest, the intention wasn't to make a feature to begin with. Certainly, like, I mean, you know, the budget certainly doesn't say that, right? And so, but I wanted to make it bigger than the usual length of a short film of mine, which would usually run anywhere between 10 minutes through to maybe 20 minutes or what have you. So I had a vision that it would perhaps, you know, last at the most maybe 40 minutes or what have you. But precisely in your question, you know, the level of scope just grew from the writing through to, you know, kind of like the scouting and finding of environments, like even the shooting of B-roll. And there's so much B-roll that I even shot for the film. None of it, well, most of it actually, not none of it, most of it didn't make its way in. It was just the level of ambition, the desire to kind of create this story that, centers itself within that of, Black womanhood, in some respects, adolescence. It's a road movie of sorts on the one hand. It's also, a journey of discovery and rediscovery. But yeah, there came a point when, I think it was in the edit stage, especially actually, that I knew, what, this film's it has to be a feature length. But I was also quite particular, especially, as an artist, that I didn't want to, make a film that kind of, I guess, like, meanders on and on. Like I can vouch and say, as an artist, having seen, a lot of artists film, I know that that's what happens. Sometimes there's, as far as I'm concerned, this is just me being critical from my own perspective, but sometimes there's almost too much or over emphasis on something that it just kind of drags on and on. But in this case, it felt like, no, there's so much gold here. I want to really hone in on the things that I think speak out about, displacement, economic kind of like disparity, through to, this idea of like a pandemic. Is it connected to COVID? Is it a different kind of, thing that's like happened at this point in time that feels very located very much with the now, right? So yeah, with so many of those kinds of ideas, it just kind of like, enveloped to that point of being a feature. I knew that I wanted to shoot something that was going to be cinematic. Like I wanted to shoot that to, that kind of spec and standard. But no, the length in the end, that kind of that got to the point when I was going through the rushes. I was like, yeah, this is going to be a long film.
I mean, a lot of kind of shaping of the film comes in the editing part or the sculpting of it. And I mean, do you usually work alone, or you're working with someone in the editing suite, or do you prefer working with someone just to keep your perspective when editing down the film, or what do you find helps for you?
Very good question. So in this case, I worked with fellow artist Ria Store, who also worked with me on, DOP work for the film as well. She works quite a lot with analog film, actually. She shoots on 16mm. But the thing that I really love about Ria's approach to making is she has quite a tuned kind of sensibility to kind of like, hone in on details. She sits there gathering details and information. She's able to tell stories pretty well with that. And so, in terms of the editing process, of course, there's a great deal that I edited on my own, but we had sessions that we'd planned where we would make notes, we would get together with those notes, talk about some of the things that, we were thinking about to begin with. We'd do a bit of editing. We'd then plan another point in time to meet, by which I would have edited, X, Y, and Z, a certain amount. And then more notes would have been made, or I would send her some of that, material. Again, mind you, we're slow. We're still coming out of, like restrictions and so on, because of course the film was shot during and then, edited whilst there were restrictions in place. So we had to still be quite careful in that respect. So, but it was great to have that second opinion of sorts. Like I knew I wanted to be kind of like brutal, of like, cutting things. And like I said, I didn't want things to kind of like drone on and on. Although being aware that there was so much beautiful footage that we'd gathered. There's a lot of material that I'd scored, audibly speaking. But again, to go back to, your question about, editing with other people, most of the time, if I'm honest, I tend to edit on my own. I do have conversations quite a lot with people who may have like helped or worked on a production. But yeah, I tend to have an idea of how things will flow. But certainly on this occasion for Wayfinder, I have to give props to Ria Store for just kind of like coming in and and really just, you know, not being afraid to talk about, you know, tuning this idea, this project to something, you know, really special by, again, just being bluntly honest, you know, and making the decisions that were necessary.
Sure. It does seem quite a timely film, especially, say, in the UK. We seem to be very much with our identity a bit in flux now. We're post-Brexit, post-pandemic, and it seems we're not under this big EU umbrella anymore. But I think what actions we take are kind of like very inform the country's character now, and it seems that's inescapable. Is this something did you try to infuse that in this film, or was there something else you wanted to look at in this film?
No, in a way I did. I mean, you know, of course, as we know, this is my first feature film, and before this, I'd shot a load of short films within a particular project called Relic Traveller, which is a speculative project which kind of, you know, imagines perhaps a bit deeper into the future, at a point in time where the United Kingdom or the West has kind of like evolved into a point of something of chaos, or becoming a relic of itself as a result of the increase of nationalism, which within the story of Relic Traveller is kind of set off by Brexit. So, you know, obviously, as we know, that or it can be debated that, you know, Brexit, you know, inspired the way that the Americans kind of, you know, went forward with the likes of Donald Trump, you know, 6 months after. You know, for me, I don't find that kind of thing, you know, kind of exclusive from the other. At the same time, you also have other nations in the West, you know, likes of you know, Sweden through to France, where again nationalism is picking up, right? I was also within this project. I also take inspiration from another kind of, you know, true story, in the sense of the African Union creating a passport that would allow Africans to travel amongst the 54 states with no issue of visa. So, you know, you see where I'm getting at. A part of the world where borders are opening, a part of the world where, you know, borders are closing. The reason why I say that is because I mentioned this project is because I feel that was very much kind of talking almost with an understanding of the violence, the consequences of that kind of violence, about issues related to Brexit. I do think that, you know, Wayfinder does that. I feel like it's grounded in a certain sense of locality much more, right? So the story is a bit more on a type of, you know, ground level. So of course there is an awareness definitely of Brexit and the issues around that, but it's, you know, it's a story that roots itself in Britishness, in Englishness, through, you know, diversity of conversations, and also, you know, characters or people that the Wanderer, you know, of course, kind of, you know, comes across. It's really there to open up the complexity that makes this island nation, as it were, you know, and that's what I really wanted to try to open up. You know, if you look at chapter 4, for example, Journey Home, which where the Wanderer happens upon a conversation between, you know, two characters, you know, Russell and Comfort. You know, you have these two people from culturally different backgrounds that are that I won't say simply coexist, but are part of a family of people that obviously live in a particular area in London, and they have constant kind of like debate and argument. And I guess what I wanted to try and like open up out of that was this kind of this feeling of familiarity. But yeah, you know, I feel like with Wayfinder, I'm still kind of, you know, the question around this uncertainty of the future definitely is there, and it's not something that I wanted to shy away from. I guess what I wanted to try and do was create a platform a bit more open for people to kind of like wonder, you know, what the hell is going on, you know, from points within that scene where, you know, I'm not going to try and spoil it for anyone who hasn't, if you haven't watched it, those of you that are listening, from a scene like that through to moments where the Wanderer, played by Percy Rodriguez, is wearing a mask within certain environments. You know, has something happened to the air? Is it?
Would you like to reach our film and TV review podcast audience? Do you have a product or service of interest to film and TV home consumers or followers of the entertainment industry? Have a film or show production to publicize? For affordable price plans for all budgets, get in touch and find out about our introductory advertising options. Reach our audience of film and TV viewers and visit our site contact page at filmandtvreview.com, or you can email us at business@filmandtvreview.com. Reach out today.
Is it filled with particular toxins or what have you? You know, so again, I guess I tried to be a bit more, you know, subtle in a way of throwing around certain types of clues. So yeah, that definitely there is a consideration of that, but I think it's kind of it's done in a way where I'm thinking at a much more kind of, you know, local level rather than thinking on a larger global one, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, on that note, I mean, you start at Hadrian's Wall, but what made you choose those waypoints that you kind of stop on at chapter points? What made you pick those points like Hadrian's Wall and Margate and so forth? What want to focus on those points in?
Yeah, absolutely, good question. So, you know, with the opening shot is literally staring out from from Bowness and Solway towards Scotland. So, you know, you're really looking from the edge of a certain point of, you know, of England. And I'd already shot material in Hadrian's Wall a few years prior in a collaborative project with an artist called David Blandy. I spent a good part of near enough 2 days filming, and I remember after we'd shot this film, I felt like I hadn't kind of built that much of a relationship with this incredible environment that, you know, upon doing research, I found had you know, inspired the likes of G.R.R. Martin for, you know, Game of Thrones, for example. You know, you can really gather that when you go to Hadrian's Wall. Particular parts of it is staring out from cliffs and so on. And you know, additionally, you know, in terms of the research phases, one of the things I was very interested in exploring was, you know, the Black presence, the African presence within a place like the United Kingdom. When people talk about the likes of the United Kingdom or England, you know, people, you know, there's a narrative that kind of there's a narrative that talks about the Black presence or African presence within the UK as if it was, you know, within the last, you know, 100 or so years, and it goes way back further than that. You know, again, if you think about the Romans and their settlements, you know, there were African Roman soldiers, right, who also contributed to, you know, the establishing of the wall, as it were. So, you know, again, the film isn't kind of explicit in saying that, but it talks about this understanding of, you know, this land being your land, right? As is located in the script in the first chapter. So, you know, most of the environments along the way, you know, even including going down to the likes of, you know, Margate or Essex, I also personally have a relationship with those places, you know. So, you know, Essex, like I mentioned, I kind of spent a bit of my childhood kind of like living there with my dad. And so there are themes that are somewhat autobiographical, but I try to kind of like, I guess, like take a step back from that. The film's not about me, although I am directly kind of like connected to that of sorts. And, you know, then coming through to spaces like the likes of you know, the National Gallery within the third chapter, the Land of Smoke. You know, in the kind of like writing stage, that really felt like a place to kind of have fun with, you know, the gallery space or the museum as a place of trauma and and anxiety. You know, I shot that scene like a horror film. I was thinking about it as a horror film. I don't, you know, and this probably sounds a bit contradictory because I'm an artist at the end of the day and I make work that exists in galleries. But, you know, I don't feel like galleries have, you know, interests of somebody like myself as a young Black person who's, you know, come from poverty at heart. You know, it's not designed like for that purpose. Museums are not designed for that purpose. You know, you only have to go as far as you know, Blackout Tuesday, when so many of these galleries were making all these gestures of saying, oh, you know, we're doing this work, etc., etc. And it's like, well, if you're doing that work, you don't have to kind of like talk in this, you know, this white guilt-driven kind of manner. You do the work, right? But, you know, coming back to the point, I really wanted to think about a site like the National Gallery, which, you know, when you think about the multitudes of paintings, you know, the works of Tishane, Rembrandt, and so on, you know, there's so much violence in a lot of these things, right? But it doesn't really get spoken about so much in that way. And so, you know, with the opportunity that I was given to be able to, you know, shoot in there, a big shout out to Priyesh Mystery, who works at National Gallery. He made that happen. It just felt like an opportunity to talk about this kind of in a creative way, in a cinematic way, but again, in a way that I felt was, you know, addressing, like in many other chapters, you know, an elephant in the room. That's before we even begin to think about the conversation of the work of, you know, JMW Turner and so on. So yeah.
I mean, I suppose the viewpoint, some autobiographical perspective on it, but who's the character of the young female protagonist, the Wanderer, actually based on? I mean, in the writing stage, I assume that was based on something or someone.
No, definitely, no, good question. Yeah, so the Wanderer was based on my sister. Yeah, my sister Laura. She's about a year and a half younger than me, and in the initial kind of stages of developing Wayfinder, I was, you know, and the film still does. It's an ode to that fearlessness that I've been inspired by in being raised mostly by Black women, being surrounded by Black women, you know, growing up, and also in my life in general. You know, as kids, I was very much I was quite, what's the word? I was a bit more insular than she was. She was very outgoing. You know, she loved traveling, whether it was, you know, going out to, you know, like club events and, you know, like, what's it, we call it, like shubs or whatever, that kind of thing, through to just traveling to different regions. I was very insular. I'd stay at home. I'd, you know, read my comics or play video game or what have you. But I noticed this. I noticed this kind of difference between us. But particularly this level of courage that my sister has, that I've noticed also in many other women, many other Black women, that I wanted to, you know, locate and celebrate somehow. And so, you know, even in the the brief kind of writing stages, I would talk to my sister about this film, and I was telling her about these ideas, and it probably seemed a bit weird to her. She does come along to my shows and so on, but she knows I think in an abstract way at times. But, you know, there were times when I was asking her about certain clothes that I might have remembered her wearing a month or a year ago, or what have you. And that again also inspired the process of approach to you know, the outfits that, you know, the Wanderer wears across the journey of the film. So it, you know, that was quite an interesting, you know, process of sorts. I don't think I'd worked with, you know, my sister that closely before, although I've worked with family members, you know, through my practice, and it's something that, you know, happens continually.
It seems almost the character is like an avatar of sorts, kind of based on guiding through, like, say, the map of the UK from point to point. And I think you've mentioned that you quite an influence in from gaming and that kind of like how they frame things. So was that, can you consciously see that now? I mean, in your work, that maybe it's there, or unconsciously, this the gaming narrative or this kind of like format in film, which you don't really see that much, really.
Yeah. I mean, that's the interesting thing with film, is that when it comes to gaming, essentially what you either have a consideration of gaming in the sense that, you know, the film will be an adaptation of a piece of gaming culture or property, right? You know, whether it's like Resident Evil, you know, through to, I don't know, the upcoming Mario film or the old Mario film from the 80s, 90s. You know, in this case with Wayfinder, that reference of the cinematic kind of taking place through the movements of a character happening across environments was very deliberate. And you know, a big reference point video games wise for me is The Legend of Zelda. You know, if you think about Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, even through to the more recent, you know, Breath of the Wild, but we'll stay with the ones in the 90s for now. You know, there's even that the opening scene of Ocarina of Time that kind of establishes the highly end like landscape in which, you know, Link is riding across on this landscape on Epona, the horse who you befriend upon your adventure. And of course, you know, for those of you who are gamers, we're aware that, you know, the character Link, apart from kind of like giving like gasps or audibles of like laughter and things like that, is somewhat of a silent character, and thus is, you know, an avatar, an extension of ourselves, really. So, you know, in coming back to that with the Wanderer, I was really inspired by this potential to think about, you know, body language as a means of communication, you know, so not necessarily having to be verbal through, you know, direct words, but through, you know, subtle movements or moments of recollection of thought and you know, gestural kind of like responses. And you know, that for me, those are some of my favorite moments in games. You know, it's those moments of travel, and sometimes of quietness that actually isn't particularly quiet. It's just your transition of movement is being guided by yourself. You know, that point in time where, you know, three-dimensional gaming really kind of like came through with the likes of, you know, Legend of Zelda and so on. You know, us as gamers, we begin to have or take control of a camera, or we're able to control and fixate upon, you know, enemies or objects and things like that. So there was certainly that type of thought taking place as to how, you know, I was approaching the film, you know, cinematically, but yeah, also, you know, thematically as well.
The influences from like artists or even directors that, I mean, growing up, like you said, you were watching it, or your mum was quite almost like your own film school there. Was there any director's work that you kind of honed in on, or films that you specifically watch or still watch again and again, just to kind of like get your kind of like your eye or where you want to go in filmmaking, or
there's probably almost too many films to mention.
Yeah,
like I'm literally staring at like my collection of like DVDs. I've stopped counting how many they are. They're all like in genre now. There's so many. But I mean, I guess, you know, the work of Spike Lee, you know, his earlier work, you know, in this case, perhaps I would think about a film like Crooklyn, you know, which of course, you know, centers on the experiences of a young Black girl, and you know, has its moments of monologue and what have you taking place. The work of Shane Meadows, you know, This Is England is a massive favorite of mine. Dead Man's Shoes, I thought kind of brought about brought about horror on a local level, but also on a social one as well. Deals with depression in quite a unique way as well. That kind of work. And then guess with more recent stuff, the work of Anna Lily Amipora. Was it A Girl Walks Home at Night? A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. I really liked the approach to the reconsideration of what a vampire might be, and I'm a sucker also for set pieces. I love the scene with the skateboard, like just that kind of like gliding motion in that is just is genius. The work of Donald Glover, I really think Atlanta's an incredible show, like really, really just so well written, and just I've just finished watching the third season, and there's conversations around blackness that are opened up on a more international level, because main characters are in Europe at that point in time. It's that show for me is something that I can go back and certainly watch again. TV shows like The Wire, of course, I love The Wire. I just my favorite season has to be the fourth season. It's with the kids, like that I thought was genius. There's loads of stuff. I mean,
big question.
You ask me again tomorrow, I'll give you
I know I'm the same. Have you set your sights on maybe another film or kind of another medium? I mean, anything down the wire that you think you want to explore with film, or
Oh wow, like so here's the thing, like I always have like a load of ideas that I think about that I would like to develop. So having got to the other side of making a feature film and making a film I'm really happy with. Definitely there are ideas. There's definitely I guess it's really about having the right opportunity in relation to that. Like I said to you earlier on, this film wasn't planned as a feature. It just kind of like evolved and developed in that direction. So to perhaps get a bit more support in the future to even push that fidelity further. And I don't mean fidelity simply in terms of technology. It's really just opening up the scope and the potential by having a bit more support, that kind of thing. As you probably noticed with the film, there's a lot that I do behind the scenes, and I love that. But as a continued thing in the future, and I really do hope that I get to make more feature films, because it was such a beautiful experience to open up these ideas in a feature length kind of direction. I won't talk about the ideas that I have, because I think it's even at this day and age of social media, it's nice to kind of keep things until they're done or nearly done. But I've that's something I really would like to do, and it's just setting up the right opportunity, which it's not dissimilar from making work within the art scene. You as you evolve, as your work evolves, your trajectory evolves, you become much more kind of defined in the decisions that you're kind of like making. So there are ideas, and even just ideas to approach different types of genres as well. But again, only if the opportunity is right. If it's not right, then I won't do it. I'm a bit stubborn like that.
Well, okay. Well, thanks. So Wayfinder will be on the 27th of July. I think it's Verve Pictures. Do they got a release, haven't they? They got a cinematic release. So I think, but there'll be a Q&A you'll be holding on 27th of July at Genesis Cinema in East
Indeed.
London. It's good cinema, that is. Well, it promised to be enlightening, but I'll leave it for now. But thank you, Larry. We'll be looking forward to that when showing and maybe a more national-wide release later on. Who knows, next year.
Yeah, let's hope.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining me. And for you at home, see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this film and TV review.com episode. Catch the latest film and TV reviews, together with regular episode content from the world of film and TV every week. See you soon. Would you like to reach our film and TV review podcast audience? Do you have a product or service of interest to film and TV home consumers or followers of the entertainment industry? Have a film or show production to publicize? For affordable price plans for all budgets, get in touch and find out about our introductory advertising options. Reach our audience of film and TV viewers and visit our site contact page at filmandtvreview.com, or you can email us at business@filmandtvreview.com. Reach out today.